Thank you.
Hi. I just want to take just a minute to introduce Carol McCusker, who I think is probably familiar to most of you here. She has been the curator of photography at the Harn Museum for the past 11 years. And before that, she was a curator of photography at the Museum of Photographic Arts in San Diego for 9 years. And I can't tell you how many shows she has actually put on for us here and there as well. She received her BFA in Studio Art and Art History from Massachusetts College of Art in Boston. And then she received an MA and PhD in art history with an emphasis on the history of photography at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. Now, today what she's going to talk about is a current exhibition. This is the one about Jerry Uelsmann's life, and I'll let her really get into that, leave that to her. I'll tell you that this exhibit will be there until mid-February, so, but don't wait till the last minute to go and see it. It's well worth the trip, so thank you. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me again. It's great to be here. Let's go to the first, just to give you the dates of when this exhibition will be up. We're going to look at a video in a few minutes. So that's why we've got two screens going. So we're trying to coordinate that, but that's okay. I'm wearing a mask just because I'm around students and I want to protect you as well as myself, but you know, while I'm talking, I'll take it down. So this is an exhibition that's very near and dear to me. I could start crying right now. Didn't think that I would. I didn't know Jerry the way many of you did. I was here for 11 years, and as many of you know, he went through some hard times starting in, about 2014. And so I saw like the struggle of Jerry, and what was phenomenal to me, and I said this at a memorial service that we had in September for him, and we're also going to have another one in February. So that screen is going to come up in a moment. Is that he was a great teacher, not a teacher of photography only, but how to live life in optimism. And if any of you know that, you realize that he had a beautiful balance of knowing suffering and at the same time being able to be like the laughing Buddha, to be able to tell jokes and keep humor in balance to what life was throwing at him. So, this celebration of his life, it's 37 photographs, and what I'm so grateful for is that some of them are from the Harn's permanent collection, but Andrew Uelsmann, who was Jerry's only child, his son, has allowed me to go into Jerry's home and to get some of the iconic vintage photographs that Jerry made, and those are also in the exhibition, as well as to go into his studio and take some of the whirligigs and the toys and the jokes and the gifts that people gave him that are a figment of his imagination, in the sense that they kept the whimsy in him alive. So this was just a wonderful treat for me to be able to have that combination of the greatest of Jerry's and then also from the Harn collection. So we did have a remembrance for him. 75 people came to it. We were in the rotunda at the Harn, and everyone shared memories of him. And if we feel comfortable at the end of this presentation, there are many of you that knew him much better and longer than I did. So I welcome people even just saying a few things that they remember about Jerry. But on February 11th, it's a Sunday, we will have another remembrance for people that couldn't make the September one. And there are people that are coming in from out of town for this particular one. And yeah, I think it's a great thing to keep such a treasure alive that this man was. So mark your calendars. This is the title wall when you walk in, and this is one of his most iconic images that Bon Jovi, the rock band, put this on their CD and had it as a scrim backdrop to their stage performances. It's just one of his great combination prints, and we're going to get into his printing process in a little bit. So the main themes and concepts are, I wanted to follow this exhibition in a kind of chronological order. These photographs I collected from Jerry and purchased them from him that were his earliest photographs. And what you can see here are very straightforward. There's no combination printing. And if you don't know what that is yet, I'm going to explain it to you, and he's going to explain it to you. But these are straight on photographs. And to just talk a little bit about his early years, he was intent on becoming a photographer and was the son of a grocer in Detroit. And at one point, he just decided that he was going to go study commercial photography. And he thought that he would be a portrait photographer. He thought that he could contribute to catalogs and document photographs for textbooks. I mean, it was a very straightforward process that he thought he would be. And this is in the late 1950s, when photography was still struggling to be any kind of concept of a fine art. And so he went to Rochester and studied at the Rochester Institute of Technology. And when he arrived there, he was a master of understanding the technique and the craftsmanship of photography. He excelled to the point that further on in his career, Ansel Adams, our preeminent American photographer, would recognize Jerry for his craftsmanship and have him come out to Yosemite National Park, where Ansel Adams gave regular workshops, and Jerry was going to be one of the teachers beside Ansel Adams. What a great, wonderful experience and mutual respect that they had for one another. But back to Rochester, what he wasn't really banking on was the fact that there was a photographer that was working at RIT and teaching named Minor White. And I don't know if any of you know Minor White's reputation, but he was a follower of the Russian mystic Gurdjieff. And in that process of becoming attracted to mysticism, he converted his photography practice not just about photographing the world in a documentary, straightforward style, but to photograph rocks and nature, the air, the sky, for its mystical content. And, you know, this was something that Jerry was not quite prepared for. As well as there was another professor teaching there, Henry Holmes Smith. These two men would have a profound effect in changing the trajectory of Jerry Ullsman's photographic practice. One of Minor White's most quoted sayings is, "Photography captures subjects for what they are and for what else they are." And it's a really kind of a conundrum to think about why someone would use photography, which is about documenting the real world, to represent the ineffable, the thing that we can't quite express or see in the world, which is a kind of mysticism. So this was really something for Jerry. And, you know, in the video that's in the exhibition that you'll get to see, we have 17 minutes of it blocked out, and it's on a big touch table so you can watch it. And it is starting with just Jerry talking about his work and his process, other curators and collectors talking about his influence on the history of photography. But he does talk about Minor White being someone who was quite profound to him. So off he went, you know, and the 1960s happened. So, you know, what a lot of people felt about Jerry's work is that it wasn't relevant to the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement. It was too touchy-feely. But at the same time, we know that what was happening in the 60s where people were looking for alternate realities. And they were taking drugs, they were smoking marijuana, they were dropping out. And now, Jerry never admitted or said anything about him doing any of that, and I actually don't think he did. Nonetheless, what he was tapping into was an alternate reality. So here we have these straightforward, beautiful images. The one on the lower right, I mean, you can see how a master printer he was to be able to capture that, which is just a bunch of onions, a plant that he must have gotten on the ground to photograph that so closely, but to make the proper exposure and then to produce it in the darkroom with all those lush, velvety grays and blacks. He was a master printer. So here we have some of his classics that we got from his archive at his home. You'll see these in the exhibition. These were done in the 60s. And you know, he didn't title his photographs, at least most of them he didn't title, because he didn't want to direct the viewer towards a very specific meaning. That meaning was very subjective, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So what was wonderful about him is that he joined this and found this society of fellow photographers. And when you walk into the exhibition, you're going to see this one wall that we got all these photographs from a variety of people who photographed him throughout his life. Some of them donated these photographs to the Harn. Others came from his archive, his studio. Okay. And here's a close-up of some of them. Can you still hear me okay? Yeah. And here we have, these are little snapshots, little 3x5 snapshots that you see him with Ansel Adams up in the top right, Dwayne Michaels and Arnold Newman, Andre Cortege, his fellow teachers there, Robert Heineken and Todd Walker, Andy Grunberg, who was a big New York Times critic of photography, and then in the lower right with Yvonne Streetman and Pete Turner. I mean, this is the society that he was entering into, and it was an embrace of fellow photographers who enjoyed one another, each other's company, and he was at the top of his game. Here we have him with Ansel Adams and Endogene Cunningham. They're blessing Jerry as an honorary West Coast photographer at Weston Beach at Point Lobos in California. You can see their sense of humor. One of the last portraits made here by Dr. Giuliano Deporto, who is a doctor here at Shands, and him in his darkroom with his 7 enlargers. We'll get to that in a minute. And our local celebrity photographer, Randy Batista, would go to Yosemite with Jerry and photographed him, collecting his images for his photographs. There's also a whole collection of his contact sheets, which if you know anything about film photography, that you would make your contact sheets first and see what you actually got on your film. And here he is in his studio, and you can see all of the contact sheets all around him. And that's pretty much how he had them constantly in his studio. If any of you went there, they were just available. Some of them were in files. He knew where every one of them was so that he could find that negative, corresponding negative, and make his prints. This is a little nook in his studio where you can see the contact sheets down below, but also all the little toys and Victoriana and strange collections that he had. Some of these are in the middle of the gallery at the Harn right now. And then he also collected local artists. He was a great supporter of folk art and local artisans, as well as the friends that he knew that were great photographers like Andre Cortege, Imogene Cunningham, Ansel Adams, would make gifts to him of beautiful prints, or they would exchange prints. So these are also up in the gallery so that you can see what he surrounded himself with. That to me is like one of the most important things, is to see the environment that an artist works in that keeps them company. I mean, he spent very long hours in the darkroom, sometimes 7 or 8 hours a day on his feet, and loved every minute of it. It's what made his life have purpose. And then to go out and to be social, he was an enormously gregarious person, as many of you know, with a great sense of humor, and also a way of making people feel comfortable and at ease. So here's some of the folk art. He collected Imogen Cunningham. Those are two of her prints on the right. Alfred Stieglitz, Edward Weston, some of the folk art, Norman Jensen. And then the little objects, these are in vitrines in the middle of the gallery, and just some of the silly sayings that he would find and clip out and paste on his wall. I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. Art may be effective therapy for emotionally troubled. And he loved dogs. So this is his homage to all the dogs that had blessed his life. He had little sculptures of dogs, and then Randy Batista took that one photograph of him with his dog, Lucy. This was a man with an enormous joie de vivre. He really knew how to live well. So all of these objects made his life richer, and they kept him company. This is the part of his studio. His studio has 3 rooms in it. This is the first one that you enter, and you can see a lot of gifts that people have given him. And then Yvonne Streetman, who is alive and well in Gainesville here, made that Polaroid print of him. So, you know, these are only one of a kind. It's a big 20 by 24 Polaroid camera. And she said, well, he always put these balls in his photographs. So she suspended that one right over his head. And he was always good for the joke, too, as well. And he loved angels. He had a collection of angels all throughout his studio. And she gave this other gift of Peggy Leg to him as a gift for his 80th birthday. That's also in the show. Here's a sampling of photographs where he used that sphere. You know, this kind of suggestion of what, you know, he wanted us to figure that out. So Buddhism he would talk about. I don't think he was a practicing Buddhist, but Buddhism and Zen Buddhism and the laughing Buddha were things that he often talked about. You know, they were part of this suggestion of something beyond our world or the world that we are part of. So what you see him here doing, and this is going to be evident when we start looking at the video, is he's holding a mirror up to one of his contact sheets and dividing the image in 2. Can you see that? It's like right here, you know? Yep. And in that way, he very often could figure out what something would look like, resulting in an image like this. So you see, it's kind of a Rorschach. It's one of the most famous and oldest trees in Yosemite. And he's placed a kind of Buddhist face in the center, but they are just mimicking, it's both sides are equal. And here is one of his most famous, The Philosopher's Desk. This is one that he did title. And it's 7 process sheets, and these are also up on the wall, so you can see the process of each individual 7 images that have been put together to create this image. So now we're going to go into him talking about it, because I think it will give you a much clearer idea of his process. This is about 7 minutes long. Yep. So that's his good friend, Peter Bonnell, who in 1967, Peter Bonnell and John Zarkowski were the curators of photography at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And Jerry had his solo show there at MoMA. And Peter Bonnell remained a friend. They were friends together throughout their entire lives. And, Jerry was from very humble beginnings, as I said earlier, but I also think that that fed into him being a beautiful human being and a very good friend to people and a great mentor to people. I'll tell you a few of his awards. He had exhibitions. MoMA, he always, held that up as the epitome of success for him. And I want to question that a little later. Remind me to do that because I would argue with him about that. But he had important exhibitions. He had prestigious awards and numerous publications. The books on his work are numerous. And I was lucky enough that he asked me to write the essay for his last big publication retrospective of his work. And that's at the exhibition too, and on sale at the Harns Museum store. But then he also got a Guggenheim Fellowship. He won a National Endowment for the Arts Award. He became a member, honorary fellow at the Royal Photographic Society in England, and a Lucy Award towards the end of his life. He was one of the founders for the Society of Photographic Education, what's called SPE, and that still exists to this day. So in the mid-1960s, when he was up and coming, he was here at UF in 1960 and stayed teaching until the late 1990s. That SPE became a forum, national and regional, for a kind of annual meeting place for educators, photo educators, of which I consider myself one, a curator, also students who were studying photography and going to universities, creating university programs that championed photography as a fine art, to really insert that into the curriculum of universities, and to even go on to get a master's degree in photography. Jerry and his colleagues that you saw in those snapshots, they were the ones that pushed that forward here in the United States so that it would become a place and a forum through SPE for ideas, images, teaching skills, relationships with one another, networking, so that photography would always have the momentum that they wanted for it. When he won the Guggenheim in 1967, that was also in tandem with the 1967 MoMA exhibition. And, you know, he wanted his prints to come to him after taking the picture. Now, that probably sounds okay, you know, but, you know, the main way of photographing in the Ansel Adams way was that you did a pre-visualization of the image, and you set up your camera, your exposures, all of that, the frame, to make the image on the negative. And then that was it. And then, of course, there was a beautiful magical dance in the darkroom to create a beautiful print. But Jerry didn't do that. I mean, he was taking pictures like those images that you saw of Randy Batista photographing him in Yosemite. He would photograph anything, all in his travels, that he then had this bank, almost like he was a stock agent to his own photographs, and would use those later so that there was no pre-visualization, it was post-visualization. So this is where all of that creativity comes to play, and that photography to him was just a registering of light, but that the final product was yet to be made, and it wasn't part of the original exposure. For those of you who are photographers, that makes total sense. For some others, you know, that's labor intensive, and as he's proved in this video, there was a lot of trial and error for him to get those composite prints exactly the way that he wanted them. So can we go back to the PowerPoint? Are we on it right now? Yeah, I think we are. So, you know, in the darkroom, that was his realm. He had music playing all the time, a variety of music that kept him going. That was his place where he came alive. I don't know if any of you were in the darkroom with him ever. I had the privilege to do that several times and watch him work on an image. And, you know, the Navajos talk about the trickster. And I kind of feel like there was a little trickster in Jerry, and that he could conjure images from this encyclopedia of photographs that he knew that he had the negatives to, that he could bring together, and that all of it was kind of an illusion and allusion to the mysterious quality of life itself. I feel that there was something very tender and vulnerable about his practice, that he would always deflect with humor, but yet there was a quote that he had here that that life was about the mysteries itself, and he would talk about that. I also think that, could we go back one just before we hit this particular image? Sorry about that. That his images were, actually, we're actually going to go to that one because I'm going to come back. This is sort of a conclusion about the way that I think of his photographs. But I've heard some people in the gallery, because I'd like to go down and just watch or listen to people, and they have thought, and even some of the docents, that Jerry invented composite printing. And so he would say himself, even in this video that you'll see in the gallery, that in no way did he invent this. And so we're taking a trip back to 1857, and look at this amazing composite photograph. This is in 1857. Photography was only, 20 years old at that point. And what you see here is one of the masters of composite printing, O.G. Rylander. And this print was actually quite large. It was like about 5 feet across. And it's the two ways of life. And what you see in the center is the young man with his ear listening, being pulled to either go towards, these are allegorical choices for him to either choose vice or virtue. And so there's lust and gambling and idleness on the left-hand side. And then there's righteous prayer and marriage and charity on the right. And these are 30 negatives that Rylander put together on one exposure. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling to think how he produced this at that early stage of photography. And there was a lot of objection to the nude women because people were used to paintings and sculptures of nudes, but not the verisimilitude of photography. So that was disturbing and very controversial. However, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert at the time had a darkroom set up in Buckingham Palace. And Roger Fenton, who is one of the premier, mid-19th century photographers, he was the first war photographer who went to the Crimean War. But Roger Fenton taught Queen Victoria and Prince Albert how to make photographs, how to expose and print in Buckingham Palace. And so despite the controversy about the nude, Queen Victoria purchased this as a gift for Prince Albert. And when she saw it at the Manchester Art Treasures exhibition in 1857. So this is definite proof. We'll have another example. I wanted to show you another one. Oh, I'm sorry, I should advance these myself, sorry. Fading Away, which is Henry Peach Robinson, also a contemporary of Rylander's. And here we see something that, is considered a taboo subject, this intimate narrative of a family tragedy. And the scene is on this bedridden young woman who is dying of tuberculosis, which of course we know was so prevalent in the 19th century. But it's also thought that it's possibly about a broken heart because of the Shakespearean title that was given to it first before it was changed to Fading Away. And the title was She Never Told Her Love. And so, there's a kind of, conundrum there, but it was notorious for addressing something that was too painfully intimate in Victorian England. And yet Robinson's, this is it's 5 separate negatives that he put together for this. Blending it seamlessly the way that Jerry did. And again, Prince Albert purchased this for the collection, the Queen's collection. And he also had a standing order for any major composite photograph that Robinson made. And then just one last one, which brings us closer to our time, the First World War. Frank Hurley was the photographer for the Australian Imperial Forces. Frank Hurley also survived the Shackleton expedition, if anything of you know about the Shackleton expedition, which was in the Antarctic, and it was 2.5 years of horrible conditions. So he survives that and then goes back to England and to enter the trenches of the First World War. And he made these composite photographs because the cameras were still too slow and too heavy to capture the action, and also what he said was the terror and horror of the trenches. And of course, his editors, specifically the official war historian and editor, Charles Bean, labeled him a fake. But you can see here that he actually had these blown up to mural size and did his own exhibition after the war in 1919. And he was, even though people profess that he was not accurately recording the war, he said that he sat in the gallery and listened to the soldiers coming through looking at these photographs, and that most of them felt that there was a feeling that justified what Hurley had done, so that he felt vindicated. But that's just to say, composite printing has been going on for quite a while. And one more. So just to go back to Jerry, these are images of the women in his life. He had 3 wives, a son, and there was a woman towards the end of his life, which is also an indication of how open he kept himself. In 2015, a Swedish scholar, Moa Peterson, contacted him and wanted to write about him. She came to Gainesville, and she inspired a whole other series for him of photographing her, and that you see in the lower right. And she created a beautiful book that just came out this summer, all about Jerry's early formative years, and that's also at the Harn. But you see him dealing with being an academic. I love this image of all of the paperwork and the walking away from the circle of continuous meetings. The one on the right there, he made that in homage to his mother when she passed away. And this is what I feel about Jerry, that I actually was with him in the darkroom when he made that lower right image and was working on its perfection. And I said to him, "That's you." And he's, "No, it's not." Well, who else could it be? Even if it's a projection of every man, I can't help but feel that he experienced loss, the death of his father, his mother, some friends, that undoubtedly, his photographs are informed by picturing these anonymous figures in the process of leave-taking or dematerializing altogether. And, they depict worlds that exist alongside others, that boat floating in the sky. So I feel that this is part of the duality of Jerry, that he always maintained a balance of looking at the more complex aspects of being human. This image to me is, I just think it's one of his most profound. And this was right after his last marriage ended. And it's one of the few where he does a horizontal take instead of bottom to top. And he's left himself very vulnerable, very fragile, a very beautiful image. And then we found this on his drying rack. Now, in the last couple of years of his life, he wasn't able to go into the darkroom, but there's these screens that are drying racks for photographs. And this one was in one of those. And that's a famous tree in Yosemite that has since, it's so old that it finally just kind of collapsed in on itself. And there was a great mourning of the loss of that tree by a lot of people who go to Yosemite on a regular basis. And he would photograph it whenever he went there. But then he wrote on the back, that this was a work in progress. It was just the second darkroom image. But I have that as the final image in the exhibition. And this is how I lay it out on that specific wall. with two of his angels, the sculptures that he loved. So let's just look at this. Well, I want to read this to you because this is from the essay that I wrote. And when I sent him the essay for him to proof it and approve it, I had to wait almost 2 days, and I was biting my nails, and it was 12 pages long. And he finally called me and he said, "I want it tattooed on my body." So I was, so I'm just going to read it real quickly because this is what I loved about Jerry. Anytime you were in conversation with him, he brought up something different that he was reading. And currently, this is what I say in the essay, Yulesman is fascinated with the work of David Eagleton, a neuroscientist who studies and writes about the subjectivity of the brain. And Jerry was really into that. That's why he left a lot of his work untitled. Eagleton raises questions about the nature of consciousness by examining how genetics and subjective experiences might shape our brain's chemistry, all its fears, desires, and ideas. Regarding Yulesman, how might the embrace of Zen philosophy combined with kudzu vines, sinkholes, primordial creatures, and erratic weather influence the creative landscape of an artist who has lived in northern Florida for over 50 years? Florida offers a yin-yang experience to me. So this is why I had to put this on paper and talk to Jerry about it. It has dark waters in its rivers, but then turquoise light in its springs. Opposites are equal and constitute a single reality. As a kind of outlier in the wilderness, the South provides Yulesman with a slow-paced, focused retreat in which his work and his output is prolific, and he was a prolific composer. At the same time, the state of Florida is and has been a socio-political hotbed, and with escalating environmental problems, combined with Yulesman's esoteric pursuits, the conflicting fabric of Florida and the South may subconsciously inform his imagery in which nothing is assured or known, and layers of contradictory realities coexist. For instance, his adopted state. It has yin and yang experiences. There's rivers that are turquoise and muddy. There's hard science through NASA, and then pure fantasy through Disney. Limestone bedrock collapsing into sinkholes. A verdant and soft-looking landscape that also camouflages alligators and pythons and cottonmouths. These are the stuff of nightmares to me. And all are equal, but they do constitute this constant reality. And I feel, why didn't Jerry, when he had that MoMA show in 1967, decide to move to New York? And I asked him that, and he said, no, I didn't want to have that pressure. But then he also lamented that New York wasn't paying enough attention to him. These contradictions, we all have them, right? But I love that he could balance that, and also that this landscape, this place, I think actually nourished some part of those contradictions for him, to keep everything at a distance, and then when he was ready to embrace it with friendships from around the world. And so this is my homage to Jerry, and I would welcome, first of all, when I finish, that I would love to hear any memories that you have. But equally, if you come to the Harn, email me, and I will meet you in the gallery or give you a chance to view it yourself, and then we can talk, or vice versa. But it's one of my joys and my pleasures to celebrate the life of Jerry Yulesman, so thank you. Do any of you have memories that you want to share, or any incident that you had with Jerry? Yeah.
I was a Fulbrighter in Korea in 1967, and on the way home, I spent a month in Japan, and a major gallery there was showing Jerry Uelsmann, so that was the same year as MoMA. I really hadn't, I had met Jerry before I went to Korea, but when I came back, we became close friends over the years. But I was so surprised and pleased to see a Gainesville artist in a major Tokyo museum.
You know, I think that he was the most celebrated in Korea and Japan. They love his work, they collect it, they exhibit it often, and he went there, you know, as a guest artist often.
Anyone else want to say something? Or have any questions?
I'll say something else, because some of you old Gainesville people may have this poster, but when the Thomas Center opened as Gainesville's Cultural Center, what had been the Thomas Hotel, Jerry gave us the rights to do a poster for the opening, which was the Philosopher's Desk. And I recall that the first printing had to be recalled because the address for the Thomas Center was incorrect. But that's a collector's item if you happen to have one. I had one and gave it away some years ago, but some of you in the room may have that.
Do any of you have Uelsmann photographs? Oh yeah, great.
I was just curious about your comment earlier when he was so proud of being at the MoMA, and you would have this back and forth about that.
And what he would say? Or
When you said you challenged him.
I did.
Okay.
And he said, you know, that he did not want to enter that. I think the competition of living in New York would have been, I think he was a very sensitive person and also had an ear to, as all of us do, I don't mean to single that out, but as an artist, when you put your work out there, you know, if he heard criticism, he took it to heart. And in fact, he used to show his graduate students all the critiques of his work that were harsh. And he would say, you know, if you're going to be an artist, you have to develop a thick skin. You got to read the stuff and take it and either do something about it if you feel it's true or not. But I think that, you know, moving to New York, even though he came from Detroit, I don't think that he wanted that. And plus, being here at Gainesville, he developed the art department here to have photography, I think, at its center. And he had so many national and international young artists coming here to become photographers using alternative realities. You know, he had Todd Walker, Robert Heineken, Doug Prince, Yvonne Streetman, all of them using layers of photographs in their work, no straight photography. So that's what this place was known for. And I think that gave him a lot of satisfaction.
Okay, anyone else have something they want to add to that or ask? Okay, so.
Real quick, on Zoom, apparently when I shared the video, there wasn't sound. I don't know what's happening, but it's on Vimeo, right? So they can just put in
Yes.
Jerry's name?
Yep.
Okay.
Or you can send them that link too.
Okay, or I could send the link. I can do that. Thank you.
What did he think of people who were doing this kind of layering with digital photography, you know, in the region?
Well, his wife, Maggie Taylor, was the master of that. You know, they, in the early 90s, Epson and Apple approached Jerry just because of the nature of his photography. They wanted to give him digital, you know, the beginnings of digital to play with it and use it. And he said, no, you know, film and the darkroom were his realm of solace and creativity. But Maggie, his wife, his young wife at that point, she said, I'll try it, because she was still using film. And of course, her career took off too. I mean, the two of them in tandem were perfect matches for each other. They were doing similar composite printing. She very much in color, high color definition, scanning daguerreotypes, other pieces, putting them together digitally, and then him staying black and white and in the darkroom using film. And they traveled around the world together and had great success. So yeah, it wasn't for him, but he saw its beautiful aspects through her work. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to thank you, Carol, for
You're welcome.
doing this. Even though I thought I knew a lot about Jerry Yulesman, I learned a whole lot more today, so that was wonderful. So, and I just want to remind you that next week, we will also have a curator from the Harn Museum coming in. It's actually a switch out from what it was originally, but this is going to be the curator of Asian art. We'll be talking about an upcoming show that actually doesn't start until February, but it's a very different one. It's called Gateway to the Himalayas, and it's an exhibition. It's a traveling exhibit, and so we'll have some very different art in that. And I think we'll all probably could use a little bit of understanding about it since it's so different than what we usually see. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.